Hi there, this is Brian McKinney, Pantheon's Agency and Community Training Manager, here to show you New Relic, Pantheon, and Drupal debugging. We've got a clone of Pantheon.io set up with New Relic. This is what you'll see when you first land at a New Relic application dashboard. An application represents an environment, so we'll keep an eye on the top left of the page. Right now we're at the live environment for this NR Drupal site. We see that the views page transaction seems to be performing poorly. And here we've got it at 461 milliseconds in the live environment. Anytime you get a transaction over 2,000 milliseconds, you'll see a transaction trace there. As we do for the views page transaction at the team page. So if I click on that and then click on the trace details tab, we can click on each individual segment and expand it to see how each is performing. Or we can click expand performance problems and the whole list will expand, showing us where our performance problems are. And we can just look for those shaded in gray. Those are going to be our most time consuming segments for the transaction. And I can zoom in and look down at the different segments of the transaction. I know from experience that the preprocessed views view is a problem. Josh Koenig, co-founder of Pantheon, remedied this problem earlier today in his webinar. And I'm going to just pull his fixes in from the team page into the master branch. So while in Git mode, we'll go to the dev environments merge tool, click the merge code. While that's merging, let's go and check out the transactions here on the Josh K environment. So we click on apps, pick the Josh K environment, and we'll look at just the views page transaction. Right here we have a nice little drop down step function. I hit that views page there after. Now that the code has been deployed to the dev environment, just before the code was deployed, we see a couple of visits to that team page, and both of those generated a transaction trace. Anytime a transaction exceeds 2 seconds, it will generate a transaction trace. And now that we have the code deployed out into the dev environment, the views page will show its new performance level. Right here, and we've got that down to 868 milliseconds per request, down from well over 2 seconds per request. So now it's time to deploy that code out to test and live. A second performance win we can make is to follow the site audit feedback on our site. We have not enabled block or page caching. We actually disabled it for the purposes of this demo. We're going to run these checks. All right, here in the dev environment, we are caching now our blocks and our pages, aggregating and compressing our CSS and JavaScript. So these are easy performance wins on any Drupal 7 site. If the status tool is telling you to do this, all right, we've got that caching enabled. We gave New Relic some more traffic to chew on. And we see that after that cache enablement our performance has improved yet again. Let's take a little closer look here at the transactions. And specifically at node page view, you can see that caching has improved the performance of all of those transactions, and even the views page transaction has improved as well. New Relic has some documentation on Drupal-specific functionality, explaining how they measure those times for modules, hooks, and views. I encourage you to read this. One thing to note is that the page load timing paragraph here says that when we are compressing, because Drupal compresses cached pages, and since we selected cached pages for anonymous users, the JavaScript for page load timing is not going to be inserted into the pages for anonymous users, which makes sense. And we'll show you in just a moment how that is going to affect the metrics that we have in the browser tool. So what we want to do is go to the manual instrumentation and the Drupal example here for manually setting up the page load timing. So we're going to call the PHP agent API to generate headers and footers for a Drupal install using the theme that we have. And I'm going to insert that little PHP snippet, so not the whole code block, into my theme in the header and the footer. Insert those two PHP snippets and see. So if I want to look at a specific page, I can click on that, and then looking back at the APM transactions, I can see how the transactions there for that specific page are performing, and click a link directly back to the APM product to this transaction's specific performance. We've also heard some reports about the search function not performing too well. And if we look here, we have the search execute performance. The hook performance for search execute shows that it's not doing too great. So let's add Solr. I'm going to click settings and add-ons and enable Solr. What we're going to do is add a Solr container to all of the environments. I've configured Solr in my Drupal site here by reactivating the modules that were there and re-indexing the site in Solr. Ran a few more queries, and now we see that search execute performance has improved significantly. And again, of course, I can zoom in on the graph to see only the period of time after reactivating Solr. There we go. And if I want to dig a little deeper, I can look at the databases view. The databases view will show us a list of all of our database operations on the left. And if the operation we're looking for is not present, we can click down here at Show All Database Operations in a table and filter this list, looking for only those operations that include the word index. I can use this data to compare against previous operations that where Solr was not present, and quantify the performance improvement on the database. So we've also heard some things about the performance of authoring content here on the site. It's the last thing that we'll show. We are enabling Redis. I've also enabled the Redis module there on the brine environment. I ran a little terminus command in order to do that, terminus -en-y. And here on the brine environment, I've modified my settings.php. Important, if you take the snippet out of our Redis doc, please add contrib to the path that you're calling from settings.php. If you don't do that, your site will break completely. Redis, we're just going to add some content here on the multi-dev environment. Now that we've got our content or our Redis module enabled and configured correctly, I'm just going to run node add blog a couple of times. The first time we do anything after enabling Redis should be a little bit longer or slower because it needs to warm the cache, if you will. Redis does not have any keys in it, so we need to open up the form and set those options inside of our object cache. And back here at New Relic, we should see the effects. Now we're looking at the Brian environment, at the node add transaction, and we see that immediately after the transaction we didn't get that much of a performance improvement, but once the cache was warmed, we see that nice step down to the right. In order to verify that Redis is working, I can open up the all of the segments for the database operations. And we see that we've got some Redis gets and sets inside of there. At the databases tool, once we have Redis enabled, we will be able to look at its calls, or in addition to, or separate from the MySQL queries. And you notice that steep peak on the left, and the MySQL is not having to perform as much in the node add that I ran on the right. All right, let's merge this code into master. So here we're at the live environment. At the node add transaction, we've got a couple of nodes added there on the left at around 320. And a couple of nodes added immediately before and after the deployment of the Redis activation. So if I zoom into only the last 30 minutes, we'll see that our performance on node add has improved significantly yet again, down to 283 milliseconds per request. And with that, I thank you for watching. There's a lot more you can do with New Relic application performance monitoring Pro version. We're happy to provide this to all of our users for all of the environments on all of their sites for free here at Pantheon. Please be sure to watch the webinar that's linked in the article below, and follow the different links to the documentation that I referenced and used during this demo. This definitely takes a lot more than 12 minutes for you to explore and get used to the New Relic interface and all of the amazing data that it provides. I would wish you well and happy coding.